Chapter 5. The Encounter. 1 month into the school year, Miss Summer decided it was the time for the class photo. It was the school's tradition for all students to have their pictures taken and displayed on the large panel at the entrance. The only photographer in town, old and bored, shuffled his way into the schoolyard. He was late. The students were already lined up in 3 rows when he arrived. This time, however, he took longer than usual to get the shots right. Something seemed off about the boy at the end of the upper row. His face looked blurry through the camera's lens. The photographer fussed around for so long that even the most quiet children lost their patience. Finally, he managed to take several photos, grumbling about children these days. In his darkroom in the attic, he scratched his head over the photo of the slim boy with white hair at the back of the row. Every picture he took was fuzzy, with a mysterious halo enveloping his form. So he just settled on a random photo. But others were curious about Ferry too. Miss Summer, Ferry's teacher, was one of them. Despite his unusual appearance, Ferry excelled in many subjects like biology, art, and music. He had a talent for drawing and a beautiful singing voice. However, he didn't seem interested in math, like many children his age, for that matter. Ferry didn't have many friends. In fact, he only had one friend, Matilda Harper. The two always spent time together playing with the ball, climbing the trees, rolling over, hopping, and jumping. One time, Miss Summer even had to make Ferry come down from a tree because he climbed too high. Higher than it was possible for a human being to climb. She felt she had to watch over him. Not so much to prevent him from getting into trouble, but rather to shield him from trouble finding him. And trouble found him sooner than she expected. One day, as Ferry and Matilda were heading home, they heard a commotion coming from down the street, and saw a group of children from their class gathered in a circle, crowding around something. As they came closer, they realized what was happening. Billy Pride had pushed Ben Knight, causing the poor boy to fall and break his glasses. The children were now laughing as they watched Ben struggling to reach for his glasses. Ferry couldn't just sit and watch. "Stop that," he shouted as he rushed towards them. Billy Pride stopped for a few seconds, just in time for Matilda to help Ben stand up and put his glasses back on. Billy smirked and stepped closer. "What if I don't want to? What are you going to do?" he said, looking Ferry dead in the eye. Ferry's sight turned blurry. In the blink of an eye, he grabbed Billy, who was now hanging by his collar, his feet dangling in the air. "Let me go, you freak," he groaned. Suddenly, Ferry's mother's image flashed in his mind, making him release Billy. The boy stumbled to the ground, before quickly scrambling to his feet and fleeing, followed closely by the other boys. "You'll pay for this," he cried out as he fled. But Ferry didn't mind him. He helped Ben dust off his clothes, who couldn't be more grateful. His glasses were broken, but they could still be used, at least until he got home. "Thank you," he said, adjusting his glasses. Ferry shrugged. "You don't have to thank me." "Yes, I do. Would you like to come to my place to study together? I could help you with math." Ferry gave it a thought. "All right, but I'll have to ask my mum first." Ben nodded, a big smile growing on his face. He waved goodbye as Ferry and Matilda resumed their way home. "Billy is going to tell, you know," Matilda said after a while. "And do you really have to go to Ben? He's just so boring. All he talks about is school." Ferry shrugged. "So what? He seems all right to me. Besides, I could really use some help with math." Matilda didn't answer. Instead, she kicked a stone on the road with her worn-out shoe. Ferry realized he had never been invited to her place, nor had she ever accepted his invitation to come by and do their homework together. What a strange girl, Ferry thought. She didn't seem to like him talking or playing with other children. But then again, she was his friend. His only friend. Ferry, "I'm afraid we need to go to Mr. Bell's office," Miss Summer said the next morning, at school. "It's about Billy Pride." Timothy Bell, the school's headmaster and one of the important figures in Goodhots, was a large man whose jackets always seemed too small for his big belly, with buttons that looked like they might pop off at any moment. He was constantly sweating, so he always carried his monogrammed handkerchiefs. The headmaster was never pleased, but that morning, he appeared particularly irritated due to an unexpected visit from Albert Pride, Billy's father, who was deeply unhappy with the way his only son had been treated by one of his classmates. It was under these circumstances that Ferry first met the school's headmaster. "This is outrageous," Mr. Bell shouted, his hands waving wildly as drops of saliva flew from his mouth, "that a 9-year-old could attack one of his peers, let alone Billy Pride." Miss Summer, however, remained calm. "Mr. Bell, first let me tell you the incident occurred outside the school. I'm not saying that what Ferry did was right, but he was only trying to defend a helpless child." Mr. Bell disagreed. "And yet, Billy Pride was the one who got injured. The son of the most important man in town cannot be treated that way," but Miss Summer objected. "Just because he's the son of the most important man in town doesn't give him the right to mistreat his classmates. To me, all the students are equal. And if you can't support my approach, I'd rather resign," she declared in a firm voice. Mr. Bell's forehead vein bulged as he took a deep breath before speaking. "There's no need for such drastic measures. However, Andrew Donovan must face consequences. I recommend a 1-month suspension." Miss Summer shook her head in disagreement. "That's a harsh punishment. If we must discipline him, I suggest sending him to detention after school." Mr. Bell sighed. "Very well. You may both go now. I hope this serves as a lesson," he said, disregarding Ferry's presence. Miss Summer left the office, followed by Ferry. "I'm sorry, Ferry," she whispered. "I suggested detention so they won't suspend you." "Don't worry, Miss Summer. I know you meant well." The detention room was located in the school's basement, a chilly, humid space filled with old books, drawings, and assorted classroom props. A musty scent floated in the air, and the dim light from a flickering bulb cast eerie shadows. Desks were clustered in the center of the room, while an old teacher dozed at the front, occasionally adjusting his slipping glasses. Despite his presence, the students could talk to each other at will. Ferry sat silently in the middle row of desks, feeling the weight of the unfair punishment. He couldn't shake off the thought of his mother and how disappointed she would be after hearing the news. 5 other boys, all older than him, were laughing and throwing paper lumps toward the old teacher who was dozing in his chair. Soon, they noticed Ferry, and the paper lumps changed their direction. "Look who we have here," one boy hissed. "It's that Donovan freak. Shouldn't your mum have kept you locked away? You look like you could scare off small children with that face." As Ferry tried to ignore the laughter and paper lumps that filled the air, a sense of uneasiness crept over him. That's when he heard a deep, husky croak. At first, he thought it was only in his mind, as usual. But when a deep silence fell over the detention room, broken only by the old professor's snoring, he knew he wasn't imagining it. "Look, a raven," one boy yelled, pointing towards the ceiling. "How did it get here?" Ferry looked up and spotted the biggest raven he'd ever seen, almost the size of an eagle. Its feathers were a deep black, resembling crude oil, and its head was completely bald, with red penetrating eyes fixed on him. The raven circled above the boys' heads before perching on top of an old tall shelf. Ferry wondered how it had gotten inside, because the room had no windows and the only door was closed. "Maybe it was locked in a cage hidden here somewhere," another boy said. The boys forgot about Ferry and turned their full attention to the big bird. One of them climbed the tall shelf in an attempt to catch it. But as his hands neared the raven's dark shiny feathers, it emitted a menacing croak and flew off. The tall shelf groaned under the boy's weight, and he tumbled to the ground. At the sound of the fall, The old professor finally woke up. What's happening? He mumbled, startled by the commotion. What is this bird doing here? As the uproar continued, he noticed the agitated bird and its menacing croaks. The raven began chasing the children, its big wings knocking down everything in their path. The children screamed and scrambled to shield themselves from the bird's strong beak, but Ferry remained untouched. Out! Everybody out! The professor cried. In the middle of the chaos, everyone else dashed out of the detention room, along with the teacher. They didn't even notice that Ferry was still there. Once they were alone, the raven gracefully landed in front of him and bowed. Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, the bird left the room. Not by flying, but by walking on his feet. Ferry followed, but when he reached the end of the corridor, it was nowhere to be seen. It was already dark when Ferry arrived home. His parents were sitting at the kitchen table, waiting for him. "How could you treat Billy Pride like that?" his father roared as soon as Ferry entered the room. "Do you want me to lose my job? Who's going to feed us? I won't tolerate that kind of behavior, boy. I knew sending you to school would bring nothing but trouble. If you ever touch Billy Pride again, even with a feather, you'll have to deal with me. And if Billy Pride wants to hit you, you're going to let him." His father's last remark made Ferry's sight blur again. "No, I'm never going to let him hit me. Not me and not any other child," he said, fixing his father with a stern glare. Peter Donovan hesitated before lunging toward Ferry, ignoring Eileen's attempts to stop him. Just as he neared the boy, he suddenly tumbled to the ground, as if shoved by an invisible force. Red with rage, he quickly regained his footing, trying to remember how many beers he had at the tavern. "You won't get any dinner tonight," he barked before leaving the house. Ferry clenched his fists, then rushed to his room and slammed the door shut, flopping onto his bed without bothering to change. Slowly, he started to calm down and think about the strange events of the evening. He realized that what happened was just one of the many odd occurrences. This time, he wasn't the only one who witnessed it, though. As he lay there, listening to the wind howling and rain tapping against the window, he felt his eyelids growing heavy. Just as he was about to drift off, a soft knock startled him. He tried to dismiss it as a dream, but the knocking persisted, growing louder. He remembered his room was on the first floor, making it impossible for anyone to be at his window. Now fully awake, he opened the window, straining to see through the darkness outside. There it was. The bald raven, soaring directly in front of his window, which made the tree branches sway. Its eyes gleamed eerily, almost human-like. Ferry took a cookie out of his pocket and gave it to the feathered creature. The bird perched on the window ledge and pecked at the crumbs without touching Ferry's hand with its enormous beak. Then, with a graceful bow, it flew off into the night, consumed by darkness.